Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. With your team, there's a kind of a debate, I feel like, out there sometimes of analytics and how much they do matter, how much you put time you pour into them. And then, there's another tribe of I really don't spend any time looking at that, and we're just going to do what we do. I'm going to focus on our guys or whatever. How do analytics, what role do they play with your program?
I think it's an interesting debate, right? Because analytics definitely affect the game. And I think at all levels, coaches should have some awareness of them. Now, how much you use them, they impact you. Like, there's a lot of things that go into that. Like, what resources do you have? How much of your time can you put to that with analytics? And like, I'd say where we're at, we're in between, right? Like, we're not able to use NBA analytics where it's in depth on everything that we're doing. But at the same time, it's not necessarily middle school where I don't have any resources. I'm the only coach out there. Like, we're
just paper and pad, man. That's all I got.
Yeah. And so I get that, but I think there are some simple things you can do in analytics that can make a difference. But I also really believe it's what you emphasize and what you really care about. And so, analytics only are going to help you if it's going to help drive your team in a direction, or it's just going to provide awareness for you or scouting of your opponent. But I think you have to be super intentional on how you're going to use those. And for us, that typically means this: picking 2 or 3 things analytically that will help drive us to our goals offensively or defensively. And so, like, what are those things? Like, field goal efficiency, like, that's a pretty common one that I think most coaches understand. If you research for 30 minutes, you can understand what it is. And it's relatable to the players. Like, that's something they can take in and they can get it. There's other things that I don't think players, always understand. Another analytics that I've always liked is how teams perform together, like what groups of players, actually work well together. And, in college, there's things you can buy that help you to do that. But we've also done that without having the resources of just going back and watching film and saying this group was up 4, up 10. Then after 10 games, we think, man, this kind of affirms what I've been seeing in practice. This group plays well together. This player actually makes these things. A lot of times what that equates to is in practice is who's winning the 3-on-3, who's winning the 4-on-4, and there's usually a correlation between those types of things. But, I think those are 2 that I like because I like to know who plays well together. And I think effective field goal percentage is really important for players to realize how effective they actually are. And there's other analytic things that we might use on defense or rebounding. Just sometimes just simple, like, rebounding can be one of the most misleading stats out there if you don't really understand how it works. And so it's, just because your team, Matt, gets 10 offensive rebounds and mine gets 5, well, there's a ton of factors. You didn't just beat me by 5 offensive rebounds. I mean, what if you shot 70% from the field and I shot 40? So there's so many things. So I think, is there a simple stat that will help an analytic that will help your rebounding or guide you towards that? Is there a simple stat that will help you defensively? Is there a simple stat that will help you offensively? I think for most of us, that aren't in the NBA or Power 5, I think we could narrow it down to 2 or 3 analytics that will really help us drive to success.
And a key, like you said, is choosing things that your players care about. Because you look at a huddle breakdown and it's 4 pages, and we could look through it and we find so many interesting things, but our players, when we start to read off the page, will glaze over and we lose them. But we can also use, because I love what you said, I think analytics, they're important and they're there, and to ignore them, I don't know if that's wise. But we have to figure out what leads to winning, and then what you said with EFGs, but then also the groups that play well. Analytics can also help with role identification, playing time, and helping players understand a little bit more about the decisions you make.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, because there's a lot of analytics that can help a player understand whether they're doing well or not doing well. And I liken it to like a math teacher. Like, you know, you might be the smartest math teacher on earth and you might understand all of these analytics, but if you can't get the learner to actually use that, apply that, understand it, like what use is it? And so, like a term that I like is applied analytics. Like, what can you actually apply? Because
Right.
analytics in itself is overwhelming to people. And when you think about a coach with all the jobs they've got going on, the things that it can be really, or it can be the opposite. You dive way into these analytics. You're a genius at what you're doing, but no one understands why you're using it, how you're using it. It doesn't affect players' performance. It doesn't help them to realize, what their role is. Like, anything analytically that you can really apply to improve your team, I would use it. I mean, I think it's really good stuff. Where the problem is really the application part of it.
Yeah.
And how do I attach a meaning to it, to the learner or to my player?
And do the analytics that you're focusing on, do they actually fit your style of play?
Yeah.
Because if you're not focusing on things that really you're not working on in practice or emphasizing in gameplay, I just wonder how much time might be wasted, because we are talking about things that are good, and the stats are there that for you to see, but don't necessarily equate to winning.
Yeah, one of the things my dad used to do this. My dad was a longtime high school coach, and man, he used to do his own analytics. I mean, he would just sit, at 65 years old, he would just sit in his recliner, watch my team play, and he just kind of made up his own stuff. But one he did that I think you can find is really, it's like, points per 40 minutes is a pretty interesting one to look at your team, because we play 40, a high school game, 32. But there's many times that he handed that to me and I realized, gosh, this player would actually be averaging this if they got that amount of clock, or this player would actually be. And most of the time, for whatever reason, I don't have any science behind it, but that stat often equated to me not playing somebody enough. They
Wow.
were a better scorer than I thought, and they weren't getting into the rhythm in the game. But when they did get that opportunity, and I can think probably one or two players every single year that I might have been off on their playing time, that I just gave them a little more based on that stat my dad gave me, and it played out pretty well. Like the more they got their opportunities, even the more of the rhythm they got in there, the more of the effective score they became for us.
Is that something you would recommend that coaches do look back over, look at some games, and especially for your returning players? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yes, I think it's a good one for this reason. I think as coaches, I mean, we all have favorite players, whether people want to admit it or not. We all have favorites, and oftentimes for good reason. Our favorites are the hardest workers. They're, the best teammate. So we have those favorites, but we can also get some of that bias to get in our way of like, man, we know so and so is the best player and can score a lot, but we let them roll for the whole 30 minutes or 32 minutes, and then they become a volume guy where there's other people that are more efficient. And what would it be like if I sat this guy and played this guy a little bit more? Like, there's probably, and there's not a lot, to be honest with you, but there's probably one guy on your roster, maybe two girls on your roster that you look at and you say, gosh, their points per minute would have been third on our team, but they've got the ninth most playing time. Like, I wonder if this is something I should look into. And typically, that's what I found. Each year, I was missing on one guy that needed to
Mm.
be playing more. And I think it's helpful. Once I got him in the rotation, it was really helpful for us.
Yeah, so it sounds like a good combination of, you've got the money ball strategy. Love that movie, but it's just we're just going to go by the numbers, and
Yeah.
even with shooting twos versus shooting threes, mid range, we're just going to. And but then there's the art side of it too, like you're talking about. It's really finding a balance between those will be helpful, right?
Yeah, and another one my dad gave me that I thought was really good, and I'm sure this is elsewhere in analytics as well. And I don't know how he spent time doing this, but he compared my top three or four players and the amount of time they were on the floor to everybody else comparative in the league. And what I found out, like, it was a thing in my coaching. Like, I think as a young coach, like, man, I just really wanted everybody to play. I wanted everybody to get opportunity. They were putting in so much work, and my dad would just pound it into me. Your best players are not on the floor enough. And I was just like, oh my gosh, and it really did have me trim down my roster, where I realized that, that 5 or 6 minutes, the player number 10 was actually decreasing my number one player's time 5 or 6 minutes. And then I realized my best player was on the court 23 minutes, but their best player was on the court 30 minutes. And it really challenged me as a coach to think, gosh, am I just being too nice? Am I not really actually playing the best players? And I do think I was. And and I think it helped us. And particularly early in the season, we were an average team and we would always finish strong. And I think subconsciously, I was getting more of my better players more playing time, but it actually hurt us early in the year because I wasn't kind of narrowing that down a little bit. And so that's another one that I thought really helped me as a coach. I don't use it as much now because I feel like I've changed that as a coach, but it was actually a kind of a systematic change because I saw the analytics there.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.